Hey everyone, I just wanted to take a few minutes to go through each of the skill check questions so you can see them worked out from scratch and kind of see the logic behind how it's all done. So if we look at the first one here, this is just a straightforward factor out the GCF. So what we do is look at each term and see what's in common. So if we look at the three numbers, 9, 6, 12, we can see that the GCF for 9 and 6 and 12 would be 3. That's the biggest number that goes into 9, 6, and 12. Then we look at our variables. So we've got a p in every term, and the lowest power is 2. So that means I can only factor out p squared, because once that's done, the last term has no more p's. So p squared will be the GCF. And then same for the q. Q is in every term, but I've got squared, cubed, and 4. So the most I can factor out is q squared. So like in the notes, you would divide each term by 3p squared q squared. So take your time to write that out if you need that as kind of a guide. And then we get into the key parts of our answer. So the first part of our answer is to make sure that you take your GCF and write it in front of a bracket. Okay, and then each term up top, so there's 3 terms up top, that means there should be 3 answers in my bracket. So we go through each part. 9 divided by 3 would give me 3. P4 divided by p squared would leave me with p squared. Q squared divided by q squared gives me 1, but sometimes you just like to say, well, that cancels out, so we don't need it anymore. But it's 1 technically. Minus 6 divided by 3 is 2. P cubed divided by p squared is p. Q cubed divided by q squared is q. Then on to the last one. 12 divided by 3 is 4. P squared divided by p squared leaves you with 1, so we don't need to write 4 times 1. Then q4 divided by q squared leaves me with q squared. And that's your final answer for that one. So 3p squared q squared outside of 3p squared 2pq plus 4q squared. Sounds like a tongue twister. All right, so that's the answer to number 1. Moving on. And I gave it away in the question, so it says use difference of squares. So you look at the note, what's difference of squares mean? Well, it's got to be 2 perfect squares, and they've got to be subtracted. So if we look at both of these, 81 and 49 is perfect square, and the powers are even. So that means I can take the square root of 81x squared. And it's not just the number, it's also the variable. So the square root of 81 is 9, and the square root of any power is half it. So x squared becomes x. Then I do the same for 49, but it's y squared this time. So that means I would get 49 square root is 7, and y squared becomes y. Now it's just fill in the blank. So difference of squares will always be bracket, your first square root, minus your second square root, bracket, your first square root, plus your second square root. So it's not just the minus part, it's both of them, right? You need a minus and a positive, but you're using the same terms. So that's the second one. Third one combines both of those. It just said factor completely. So that leaves it up to you to determine, is there a GCF, is there difference of squares, or is it both? So it's subtraction, but they're not perfect squares, unless we have a GCF that makes them perfect squares. So if you look at both of these numbers, they have a GCF of 2. 2 goes into 50 and 72. And there's an x in both of them, and we can factor out a 2x. So that means both of them get divided by 2x. And now we do it like we did the first question. 2x goes in front of our bracket. 50 divided by 2 is 25. x5 divided by x leaves me with x4. Subtract. 72 divided by 2 is 36. X divided by x, they cancel each other out. Now, a lot of people stop here because they've done something, right? You've done a GCF, you want to stop. But if you look at these numbers now, they're both perfect squares and they're subtracted. So we're not finished. Now we need to do difference of squares. We take the square root of the first term, which is 25x4. So that gives me 5x squared. And we take the square root of the second term, which is 6. So now what we have to do is leave the 2x where it is because it's part of our answer. And then this subtraction bracket becomes 5x squared minus 6 and 5x squared plus 6. So I hope that helps you understand the question and the procedure to getting through these. Take another look at the practice, work through your notes, and maybe I'll come back some other time with another worked out example. Okay, bye for now.